Yeah.
Before that, it was always specific special.
Por eso pensé que era todo, porque acá se
Here or in Israel? Happy paradise. You know, the song you guys put out a couple years ago. Yeah, I was thinking like the words right after the words. So you know, that's my approach. My goal then is not academic. My goal is not kind of like your
Okay, let's get this one going now.
Okay.
Next one is
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
streaming already. I just
Okay.
sent a message to say we'll be shortly ready.
Thank you. Yes, we are.
I'm actually, I'm going to make some schedule a lot of concerts. Yes, I released my novel.
No, durante il cine frattesi.
And I'm in the research phase of a bigger project that brings people together. That's amazing.
And I think about that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I think it's like, I don't know if it's
Yeah, I know many parents do that, but I don't know them, but they go tango dancing. They go eat some burgers. Right. So, yeah, sure. Oh, in terms of dating? Oh, Tobias is Yes. Yeah. Tobias, he's the reason I live in this. No, that's why I've been here, because he works here. We've been together since we met in 2018. We've been dating since 19. No, it's, yeah. He's my person. Yeah, but that's what we planned.
רציתם להזיז את השולחן קצת?
היא חוזרת.
אוקיי.
להוריד את התמונה, שמת אותה
אז
כבר.
היא פה.
כמה היא... אוקיי.
Nice pool and stuff.
שימו יפה לסרט. שאלות שהוא מעלה לפחות.
Sure. That's funny.
אוקיי. שיר, אני לא בדיוק יודע מה את חוקרת.
אני עובדת על ספרות עברית וערבית. כן, במאה ה-20. סביב הסכמי אברהם. כן, יש לנו שיחה. כן.
I think it's a good metaphor.
Well,
Captures it all.
It captures a moment too.
Yeah.
It's like the many lives of that having a conversation. Maybe we'll be sitting there and something like that.
There's a lot of things happening, changes.
Usually in cinema, I do a lot of Q&A. The moderator sitting without a table, having like a set, and I can
Yeah, like if we need to. So maybe you could just are we going to sort of be sitting first and then it goes up when that needs to do with actually.
Yeah, because I don't know if we can, I mean, we don't have to move this a little bit. So whatever is comfortable for you.
Do you want us to leave the table? Do you want to move it?
I think if it's a good conversation, it seems like
Okay,
because it's not
then you can write. Right.
Yeah, because I'm afraid if I move, I can't move this.
no, I think it.
I don't want to delay us any further, so I'm just going to leave the stage to Rafael Balulu and Daniel Schroeder, very own former chair of Center for Jewish Studies, who will introduce him. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Shir. And again, I want to thank Shir and Natan and the Center for doing such a wonderful job of putting together this this conference and events, musical events. It's been a monumental task, and I'm just thrilled that it's finally happened, and it's been such a I think such a great success, raising so many interesting issues. Hundreds of people at the concert last night, just phenomenal. So, yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you all for coming to this this event amid our snowy Minnesota weather. So it's really a great honor for me to introduce Rafael Balulu. Rafi was born in Israel. His family came from Morocco, along with some of the large waves of immigration from Morocco. He now lives in Jaffa. Rafi's a very acclaimed filmmaker who has been deeply involved in and engaged in the social and cultural activism in Israel. Among his many works, I want to mention director of A Song of Loves, Rabbi David Buzaglo, who many of you know is among the great masters of piyut of the 20th century, who was so instrumental in kind of bringing that tradition and connecting it very much to the identities in Israel. Another one of his works that he directed, Levantine, Jacqueline Kohanov. He's currently working on a documentary series on the history of the Jews and the Muslim world, and also a feature film about the Israeli Black Panther movement. He's written and directed projects for television and 8 shorts, which won international prizes, among them Such Eyes, Batman at the Checkpoint, My Name is Solomon Hagos, and Close Your Eyes. Rafi teaches film studies at the Technion's Department of Architecture. He's a board member of the Israeli Documentary Filmmakers Forum. He's a member of the Israeli Academy of Film and Television, and a board member of the Lottery Council for Culture and the Arts, where he's the chairperson of the Film and Television Subcommittee. And this year, Rafi has joined the as a fellow at the Franco Institute at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, which has been exploring the theme of Mizrahim and the politics of ethnicity, of which I've had the great privilege also to be a part of this semester. So today we will be discussing and also getting a little bit of a preview of a documentary feature film that Rafi is working on about the life and politics of Rabbi Israel Abu Hatzira, the Baba Saleh. I know for probably everyone in this audience, I needn't ask, like, who has heard of Baba Saleh? He's a kind of such an important figure in Israel today. So just a few before we start our conversation, maybe just a few thoughts on Baba Saleh and sort of thinking about how to situate him in some of the larger issues that have come up in our discussions so far, and the music concert and so forth. So Baba Saleh is of the Abu Hatzira dynasty, a venerated rabbi and mystic originating in the Tafilalt region, southeastern Morocco, sort of the patrimonial homeland, if you will, of the dynasty. And certainly, he's among the most venerated, or was, or still is, among the most venerated rabbis after the founding of Israel. He died in 1984. And in many ways, I think of Abu Hatzira as having many different lives. So he lived through the pre-colonial period in Morocco, and through the period of colonial occupation and decolonization and independence, and then the uprooting and settlement in Israel. And of course, as many of you know, I'm sure, in Israel he's closely associated also to the Moroccan community and their identity as well. The shrine in Netivot is a place of visitation. Thousands and thousands of people go there. And you know, the question, which might seem self-evident but perhaps not, is, you know, how and why did this happen? So I want to begin, and maybe also asking a personal question about what was your interest in this project? Who do you think of as your audience? Like who would you like to, you know, really know about what you're doing, what you'd like to convey? Rafi.
Yeah. Well, hi. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Shir. Thank you, Mariel, for this outstanding professional organization. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, Daniel, for this conversation. I'll start from the end. You mentioned that I'm also a board member of the Lottery Council. So in the Lottery Council, what we basically do, we support the art. And my job is part of a committee that supports cinema. And one of the key issues, as far as I consider it in Israeli culture, is lack of budget. Money is it's like the fundamental issue. Lack of infrastructure and lack of narrative. So although I don't think about it every day and it's intuitive and emotional, the idea is to bring, you know, my narrative, my community into the larger spectrum of Israeli culture. And in that sense, I think people who immigrated from the periphery of Israel to the cities, to the main cities of Israel, or even abroad to universities in the US or other places, have this division inside of them, this split habitus, as we know it. So you always live in between. You always live your memory. You always live your identity. So if I'll be romantic, so I think about my mother, I think about my father, I think about my grandparents, and the community that I know and already disappeared because there was, you know, change of people left the old neighborhood and so on. But obviously it's bigger than that because it's also the possibility. And in that sense, my role here is also to mediate between your great and important work, because a lot of the things that I know are based on even people who sit here and do this great work of investigating and researching. But not only that, because there is other voices that are not in the academia or not in the art world, which are in the communities, and they work intensively and create knowledge and create traditions and reconstruct tradition and so on. So I don't know if this is an answer to your question, but that's an answer.
No, I think it's a good answer, a good place maybe to start and talk about your current project on Abu Hatzira. And I wanted to ask the question of, you know, in a sense, how did the dynasty become such leading figures? I think of Abu Hatzira and this dynasty as, in a sense, having many lives, and lives which get constantly remolded in different venues. And one thing which has always struck me, but perhaps this is more relevant in the dialogue more with the present of what's going on, is that the Abu Hatzira dynasty came from the same region as the exactly the same region as the current dynasty of the Alawids in the Tafilal region of southeastern Morocco. And it sort of struck me as not necessarily that at the time such a connection may have been drawn, but certainly in today's current, looking at the picture of members of the family meeting the King Hassan, the 1990s son, their current king, and so forth. So maybe it's a good place to start is thinking about their origins and those connections in Morocco and their sort of rise as an important dynasty.
So I think what I'm suggesting is that we'll watch. I brought some footage. Now it's initial footage. It's work in progress. It's not the film itself. It's actually the trailer that we made in order to sell the film to a broadcaster. The film was supported. The production company is Emmanuel, my partner, and myself. We are B Films, and the broadcaster is Hot, and it's supported also by the NFCT, the New Israeli Film Fund, and so on. And so when you propose a film, when you want to sell a film, you need to convince people that it's worthy. So this is based on first initial footage. Since then, we shot more days, and I'll talk about also the way my thinking changed and shift because of that research. So maybe we'll see 6 minutes, and we can talk about it later. So I translated it like a few days ago, so please be kind.
יש 4 ציורי שמן יפהפיים על הקיר של סבא וסבתא שלי. זה שמה לא בגלל שהם דמויות של צדיקים, אלא בגלל שזה המשפחה שלהם. כמו לצורך העניין עוד משפחת אצולה הבריטית שמציירת בציור שמן בין המשפחה ותולה את זה על הקיר.
התחיל השושלת זה רבי שמואל אלבז אבוחצירא. האגדה אומרת שהוא היה שליח, הגיע ליפו. היה לבוש, נשלח, הוא היה צריך להגיע לטורקיה, לקהילה לאסוף כסף. והוא תמיד הלך עם המחצלת הקטנה שלו. ביקש לעלות על האונייה, רב החובל אמר לו, לא מעלה אותך. הוא עמד ברציף, האונייה זזה, התחילה להפליג, שם את המחצלת, התיישב עליה ועל המים. ואז אנשי האונייה אמרו, וואו, איזה צדיק זה. אבי חצירא, אבי המחצלת. הבכור היה רבי דוד. הוא היה צדיק עצום, אבל הוא הוצא להורג. הייתה מרידה של מורד בשם בן קסם, שהתמרד נגד השלטונות. רבי דוד שחש בסכנה, וידע שיחפשו את המשפחה, את המנהיגות, הבריח את האחים שלו, את בבא סאלי ואת אבא שלי, עם עוד כמה אנשים, הבריח אותם לכיוון הצבא הצרפתי. ואז בבא סאלי הפך להיות ראש הקהילה בעל כורחו. בבא סאלי כבר בן 22, 23, אבא שלי בן 17. הם כבר גדלים עם חלוקת תפקידים. אבא שלי הוא הרב שמנהל משא ומתן ומארח מוסלמים, נוצרים, קצינים, ובבא סאלי היה כבר מצעירותו. היה ברור, הוא היה מסוגר, למד והכין ודאג לאחרים.
הבבא סאלי הוא מאוד מאוד קפדן, מאוד סגור, מאוד שמרן. אחד הסיפורים המכוננים על בבא סאלי זה שהוא טובל במקווה ומשיל את הג'לביה שלו שלב תוך כדי הטבילה. כלומר, ברמה כזאת שהוא לא רואה את עצמו עירום בתוך המקווה. כלומר, הוא מוריד את הג'לביה יחד עם הכניסה לתוך המים. זה סיפור שהוא כאילו סיפור אנקדוטלי, אבל הוא מתאר אדם שדבק מאוד מאוד באיזושהי משימה של צניעות, של קדושה, של פרישות. בבא סאלי הוא ממש הקצה של השושלת של משפחת אבוחצירא, אפשר להגיד אולי הבבא האחרון שאי פעם היה.
יום פטירתו של הרב הצדיק רבי יעקב אבוחצירא, מתכנסים ברמלה בבית נכדו הרב יצחק אבוחצירא ומספרים עד עלות השחר במעשי ניסים וסיפורי נפלאות על מי שזכה לתואר האדמו"ר ממרוקו רבי יעקב אבוחצירא.
כשאבא שלי הגיע ונכנס להיות רב ראשי, באו ואמרו לו, אצלנו הבעיה היא נושא החינוך. בכל מקום שיש מרוקאים, הרב אבוחצירא פותר להם את הבעיה. מהחינוך לא הייתה לו ברירה, אלא להיות מחובר אליהם גם שיהיה להם כוח פוליטי. פעם בן גוריון היה אצלנו בבית. אז הוא אמר לאבא שלי, כבוד הרב, מה זה השם אבוחצירא? אמר לו, אצלנו הסבא שלי ככה סיפר לו את המחצלת, אבי המחצלת. אמר לו, אדוני, כבוד הרב, אתה צריך לעבר את השם שלך לשם עברי. אבא שלי צחק, אמר לו, אדוני ראש הממשלה, נו, אתה יודע שאני לא אוכל, אבל תגיד, תן לי הצעה. אז הוא אמר לו, אבוחצירא, מחצלת, חבצלת. אז אבא שלי אמר, נו, יחשוב אדוני שיקראו לי הרב חבצלת. איך זה נראה לך? מישהו יכיר מי זה הרב חבצלת? אבל כשיגידו הרב אבוחצירא, כולם יראו, זה הנכד של הרבי יעקב, זה הנכד של זה, זה הבן של זה, יש לי היסטוריה.
קהילות הקודש שמסרו נפשם.
בבא סאלי כשהוא עולה בפעם הראשונה לארץ בשנת 51, הוא חווה משבר, הייתי אומר כמעט קיומי. הוא אולי מבין שהתפקיד שלו מעורער, כלומר בתפיללת הוא מבין שהוא ממש מנהיג ציבור שבאמת הולך אחריו באופן משמעותי, כלומר הוא באמת חי בסביבה שבה אנשים דומים לו והולכים בדרכו, והוא יכול גם נקודתית לקטוע שרשרת הדבקה של אם יש איזה חילון מסוים, הוא קורא לבן אדם הביתה וגוער בו באיזשהו אופן ומחזיר אותו לתלם. אתה יכול לעשות את זה כשאתה נמצא באזור גיאוגרפי מאוד מסוים, כשאין לך חינוך כללי, כשאתה ממש בעל הכוח. וכשהוא מגיע לארץ בפעם הראשונה, הוא מבין פתאום שהכוח שלו נשלל ממנו במובן מסוים, במובן רב נשלל ממנו. כלומר, הוא רואה על אח שלו שמתמודד עם זה, עם רבנות עיר, שיש בה אנשים שהם לא שומרים תורה ומצוות. כלומר, בעיר רמלה ולוד, שבבא חכי הוא רב הערים שלהם, יש חנויות שפתוחות בשבת, גם. יש אנשים שמעשנים בשבת לידו, יש מכוניות שנוסעות. כלומר, לא כולם שרים למרותו. אני חושב שהוא חווה משבר במובן עמוק של המושג, והוא חוזר אחורה. הוא חוזר לעיירה שכמעט ואין בה כבר יהודים, רק כדי להרגיש עוד פעם שהוא חי בסביבה שהיא שלמה. לוקח לו המון זמן להבין שהתפקיד שלו גדול מזה, שהוא לא יכול להישאר מאחורה, שהוא לא יכול להשאיר את העבודה רק לאח שלו. הוא חוזר לארץ, באמת הסיפור שהוא מתחיל למסוק. כלומר, קודם כל בגלל שיש צורך מאוד עמוק בציבור לדמות כזאת, שתיתן להם מענה שהם לא מקבלים במקומות אחרים.
אז הוא לא עלה.
Okay. You want to start?
Yeah, so in this segment, first of all, I wanted to maybe to explain also the people who were speaking.
Sure. So the people who are speaking, and it's important to understand that today the Abuchatzera family is constitute, like there are hundreds and thousands of rabbis in different ranks all over the rabbinical culture system and establishment all over Israel, from a representative of the family in the Shas party in the family until key figures like extremely important admurim, like it's not a chief rabbi by say, but it's like a very important lead rabbis, until neighborhood rabbis, local rabbis, and they are all associated and have a cultural capital and a status and a position because they are Abuchatzera. And they are all ultra-Orthodox. There are one fragment that went into what we call Mafdal. Today, it's the Zionist religious, but not in the context of the last election in Israel. It's actually the part of the religious Zionists that didn't went into the party, to the government. And it's these two people represented. One is Aaron Abuchatzera, Zichrono Livracha, Alav Shalom, which actually died, got a stroke a day after this interview and died like a few weeks after, and we have a 5-hour interview with him. And he was a minister in the government and a very, I think, important figure in the history of Mizrahi politics in Israel. A part of Mafdal, then later Tami, which is Tnu'a Masoratit Israelit. And he's also the son of Abba Bachaki and the nephew of Baba Sali. And Neria Knafo, which is also important and interesting, and is my friend, and is very interesting. I mean, I see hope when I see him. And he's the grandson, the grand-grandson of Abba Bachaki. And they're both giving a different position. I mean, Neria is, I would say, maybe in American context, progressive, and Aaron is more old school conservative, but what we call light conservative, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it could be discussed, but yeah. So these are the people.
Yeah, one of the things which I thought that came up in Abu Hatzira talking about this history was the question of power and trying to find, coming from Morocco where they were, powerful figures in a sense, needing in a sense to reinvent themselves in a sense in Israel, and to, again, we're talking about powerful, male patriarchal dynasties who move to Israel. They see their sort of their power somewhat undermined, and so reinventing themselves within an Israeli context. So what were the kinds of activities that they were involved in? How did they, in a sense, recreate themselves in a following in Israel?
Sure. So maybe I'll start talking about Morocco. Mm-hmm. As you saw shortly in the trailer, Baba Sali was the second oldest. Rabbi Israel Abuchatzera. Sali is shortened of Israel. And he was a very strict person, ultra-conservative, even in a radical way, meaning into Kabbalist ritual. He slept during the day, not for a few hours, studied during night, long fast, which probably today had an app. I mean, it's very popular today. But he did a lot of fasting, and what in Hebrew we call shmirat enaim, which is not looking at women, and basically he didn't want to meet any non-Jew. So by today's standard, he would probably consider to be very conservative and racist and exclusive, you understand. But in his terms, it was, and in the context of his culture, it was ma'ala. Say it again?
Virtue.
It was a virtue, and it was like he was like a campus, like a figure that everyone is looking at, and he was the standard of morality. And the person that actually established the dynasty was his grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov, which was really the most important person, rabbi, also by writing in the family, and the one who actually wrote and established, if you want, the ideology of the family, at least in Morocco. And they lived in the periphery. It's the largest county in Morocco, but has the least of population. It's in the southeast, bordering with Algeria. But it's also considered to be the Baladi, the original, the natives are from there. And also, as Daniel mentioned, the monarchy supposedly claim that they are from there, in order, part of it is also to create the ethos of nativity. So they actually dealt, and Jews in Morocco, I mean, differently than probably everywhere in the world, but definitely, I mean, maybe you can correct what I said, but I did read most of your work, so I know that you won't. So in Morocco, I mean, if you throw everywhere you would throw a stone, you will hit a Jew. I mean, not in the negative way. Yeah. Basically, Jews were everywhere. And the idea of a ghetto or amlach, which was very, I mean, originally was city-based and quite new. So the family had a yeshiva, which they moved from village to village and created this network of education. And basically the education was Jewish professionals, melamed, or more, teachers, shchita, other kind of stuff. The side of my mother's family is from a place called Skura, which is it's not far from there, and they also studied at this yeshiva, and they had the privilege, and it's a mythological story in our family, and it's a repetitive story that goes from family to family, that our Yeshua Peretz, my great-grandfather, studied with the Baba Sali, because, and if you think about it, the families like to think that it's something it's unique, but it's also something that identified their patriarch. But basically, Baba Sali went from one village to another, spent a week collecting money for the yeshiva, arranging the community, giving them empowerment to the leaders, to the men of the village, and that's how pretty much they constructed their capital. But they were a periphery. They were, I even might say, not important if in the whole Moroccan context, where most Jews lived in the cities, and most Jews was Talmudic-based tradition and not Kabbalist. Obviously, it's more complicated and not so, dichotomy, but basically other figures like Berdugo, Mashash, or others were very much more dominant. And even when the French constitute the Bedin in Morocco, they didn't approach the Abu Khatsera family. So, yeah, I don't know, yeah.
No, it struck me as you were talking about the periphery. I don't know, just a reflection here perhaps, but you think of Abu Khatsera sort of living in the south, in the periphery, and then they moved to Israel, and they're sort of in the periphery in a sense, right. in Netivot, and so. But one other thing which strikes me is, at the time of this mass immigration, there was still about 20% of the Jewish population in Morocco that lived in south, between sort of southwest, southeast Morocco. So it was still a substantial population. And if you go back to the early 20th century, probably the majority of the population lived in mainly rural areas, so it's part of a larger global history in that sense as well. But then, through the course of the 20th century, there's sort of this hierarchy also that developed in, thinking before, this is before, immigration to Israel, of, sort of thinking of the Jews of the mountains, when people talk about the Jews of the south of Israel, they talk about like the Jews of the Atlas Mountains as sort of as a generic idea of Jews of the South. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering about that sort of question of hierarchy and sort of, in a sense, a reclaiming of power was, in a sense, reacting also to even the internal divisions within, that were developing, through the course of the 20th century. And in a sense, reclaiming, as you say, this tzaddik and this dynasty, connecting them to, sort of the real Morocco, like the real native area, but in a sense, in relationship to these sort of the rabbinical elite, urban elite hierarchies that existed in Morocco. And then, of course, once they get to Israel, sort of these main dynasties were, that became empowered in a sense, were in effect people from, from these southern regions.
So I'll start from the end. I think the fact that the Abuhatzera family becomes so important is because of, one of the main reasons is because of Rabbi Yitzchak Abuhatzera. First of all, we need to understand that the family did, like a lot of Jews all over the world, pilgrims. They went back and forth to Palestine, Eretz Israel, during the late 19th century and until the state established. They did it, they went, they knew people, they spent time in Jerusalem, in Porat, in the Yeshiva, Porat Yosef, and they went to other holy cities, and it was this natural. But I think the key figure, and I think people don't really, definitely the ordinary person that engaged with the Abuhatzera family, the key figure is Abba Chaki. Abba Chaki, we can see him, he was this kind of, I want to say that I have a lot of respect to the family, and it's not always easy for me to speak about them as human beings, as just regular people. I did grow up, if you're in Israel, come visit in Afula, I'll take you to my mom's house, we'll eat, and you'll see a lot of icons, it sounds Christian, a lot of pictures of Abba Sali. But having said that, Abba Chaki was a scan, he was a political figure, not Macher. Be careful. He was a political figure, engaged with community, yeah. And you can see him at the opening of the Hebrew University. He was in Israel. He heard that there is the opening of the Hebrew University, and he appeared there. And he was very tall, by the way, extremely tall, with like a bass, baritone kind of voice. And he was an impressive person and very smart politically. And he was there, and you can see him, you can see him with all these German Jews, and and then you see Abba Chaki, and these are the 20s. Jumping to 1959, there is a riot in Haifa, in Wadi Salib, okay? Mostly Moroccans are clashing with the police and with the troops of the Labour Party, and no one asked him, but he just arrived there, spoke to the people, relaxed, and the fact that he was there, Ben-Gurion gave him to be part of the national committee that tried to observe and understand why it happened. So answering your question, I think that Abba Haki was a key figure that allowed the family to be dominant and give them the infrastructure of leadership.
One of the things, of course, you talked about is reflected in the excerpt here.
Sorry, my head was, I didn't answer about their positioning in the hierarchy. So, basically, everyone probably that are Israelis or know Israeli culture know that shluch is a bad word, is a negative, is a derogatory word. When I was younger and I just started to be reclaiming my culture, I came to, in weddings and bris and bar mitzvah, to my family and in front of other people and told them, we are your shluch, you should be proud. And they were basically, it wasn't appropriate. They were shamed. It's a shameful word for them until today. And it's actually didn't started in Israel. It started in Morocco, the tension between city and rural area, and also because of, as Yali Ashash, our friend, told us, because of the colonialism and among the Jewish colonialism, which was part of the imperial power, mainly of Lycée Français and Alliance, but other educational systems that created this new identity or reconstruct identity, indoctrinate their identity into a European-centered identity. And it started, so there was a gap between city and rural, and then it was a gap between French identity or colonial identity and this village people, native people. And not only that, the Abuhatzera family was a stronghold that was against Alliance and against other secular influences, but not necessarily other colonial influences, because they were very welcoming, or at least this is a very modern narrative of our days. We can talk about how and why. They welcomed Chabad, Lubavitch, which since the 30s started to open yeshivot in that area, and a lot of the Abuhatzera and the community of the local scholars went and teach there. So there was it's one of the thing in the film that we explain how this is one of the part of why a lot of Moroccans become Shasnikim and Sfaradim. It's also part of the way Israel categorized Mizrahim generally.
Yeah, I think that's, again, that's an interesting point that you raise about the introduction of, Chabad becoming an important, you could say, cultural, religious mediators in Morocco. Even thinking of it, which might seem contradictory, as part of a modernization process going on, that in some ways in competition with the this French, under this colonial system of the French education, very secular, principles and ideas of education, and how they were negotiating locally, and the Alliance really started only opening up schools in many of these areas after Chabad, and on the eve of the mass departure. Even as people were leaving, they were the Alliance was still, competing in a sense. So that also maybe leads me to another question, and thinking about this I think less known past history of the Haredi movement in a sense, or Chabad, not exactly Haredi, but the sort of Ashkenazi Orthodox movement influencing, Jews in colonial Morocco.
Right.
And then, fast forward to Israel, and of course you have these North African Jews, especially Moroccan Jews, other Mizrahim as well, very much involved in the Haredi movement and even the Litvak, the yeshivas and so forth. So this is full of all kinds of, sort of contradictions, I think, difficult to get your handle on, around, or get, sort of understand. And, and of course, Abu Hatzira specifically, there's sort of this, image of members of the family and so forth as sort of these Haredi, yet they seem very, at the same time, very, very Moroccan culturally and so forth. So I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit about this. And there's one other question also which comes to mind. Part of their empowerment, I think, in Israel had to do with their role in the, in the establishment and the rabbinate and, educational institutions promoting, so.
Yeah, so I would say, Moroccan Jewry was basically under attack of many ideas and many organizations. So we know Alliance, we talked about Chabad, but since the 40s there was there was a movement from two Jewish centers in the world, Israel and America. Mainly all of them were Zionists, in the ideology, and they sometimes with very good intention. There was a economical crisis. The joint, for example, supported a lot of, gave a lot of economical support, education, and so forth. But a lot of it was a political, trying to look for a political influence and political power. From the Israeli side, the founding parties of Israel, which is Achdut Avoda, Mapai, Mapam, and also Mafdal, BaluluMizrahi, which was, today you can't really say it, but they were like in alliance with Mapai. They were like, if you want, their religious wing. Sent shlichim, say again? Emissaries, thank you. Every day I learn a new word. Emissaries? Yes. Emissaries. And one of them came to Algeria. Now, Baba Haki, before he came to Israel, went to Algeria. The reason is that the Algerian Jewish community had a large number of secularism. So in different places, sometimes in the same community, some rabbi went and operate there in order to, sometimes because there was no enough educated rabbi in religious terms to support the community, and sometimes in order, because some people in the community had interest to strengthen the Jewish identity. We know that Rav Yosef Mashash, for example, also spent time in Algeria for the same reasons. So Mafdal sent people to these places because as part of the way the Zionist organization divided the Jewish communities, they understood that Mafdal should, and also the Mafdal instinct, realized that if they will create infrastructure in North Africa, they can bring these people back to Israel and create a group of electoral, of supporters, and bring them, which what happened actually. So he recognized Baba Haki as a local leader, and in 48, when Baba Haki came to Israel, he immediately became a mafdalnik. Not a mafdalnik as you think of Yosef Burg, which was the head of the party, but more in a Meshichi, Messianic kind of way. And that later led, to the, and as Aaron said, education was a key moment. Maybe we'll watch the second part, and then it will, unless...
Yeah, I know. I think that's a good moment
Yeah.
to look at the second.
שהם לא מקבלים במקומות אחרים.
אז הוא לא הלך לעיר גדולה, הוא חיפש איפה...
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Not too much because, okay, we're still good with the speakers.
שהם לא מקבלים במקומות אחרים.
אז הוא לא הלך לעיר גדולה, הוא חיפש איפה לגור שיש פחות סיכוי שיהיה לו חילול שבת. אז אמרו לו בנתיבות, שם אין חילול שבת, כולם דתיים, הרבה מרוקאים, כולם מרוקאים.
בבא סאלי הוא באמת קדוש, לא סתם, הוא הזכור ביותר במשפחת אבוחצירא, כי באמת בזכות זה שהוא לא מתעסק בעניינים ציבוריים בכלל, הוא הופך להיות דמות שהיא באמת דמות להערצה, המושג קדוש כמעט מתהווה סביבו. וזה בא לידי ביטוי קודם כל באיך שהוא מופיע. בת שמכסה את הראש שלו, ולא רק כובע או כיפה, אלא ממש מכסה גם את הלחיים וחלק מהזקן שלו. בהמון מובנים, באמת הוא דמות יוצאת דופן, כמעט מלאך, כמעט לא אנושי. ככה נראה מלאך השם צבאות, ככה נראה האדם הקרוב ביותר, הנשגב ביותר שאפשר להעלות על הדעת.
האם בבא סאלי הבין משהו בפוליטיקה במדינת ישראל?
בית ישראל קדם אבותינו ושמיה ואמרו אמן. יש לומר רבה מן שמיה, חיים טובים עלינו, כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו, וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
המפד"ל הייתה הראשונה לזהות את ההשפעה שיכולה להיות לו על מערכת הבחירות. בא אליי מנהל מחלקת הארגון, אמר לי, אתה יכול לקחת אותי לבבא סאלי? אני רוצה שיכתוב לי מכתב תמיכה במפד"ל. נכנסתי אליו, אמרתי לו, פלוני אלמוני, הוא מהמפד"ל, הוא רוצה מכתב תמיכה שלך שאתה תומך במפד"ל. אמר לי, טוב, התיישב על השולחן, ישב וכתב, ונתן לו. הדפיסו מזה אלפי דפים, הסתובבו בכל הארץ. וב-1970, כשאבא שלי היה אצל אחיו, אכל צהריים עם תיירים ממרוקו, ובחזרה עשו תאונת דרכים. אבא שלי נהרג, יש רק אבוחצירא אחד. ב-74 אני כבר חבר מפד"ל בכנסת. פעם ראשונה אתה נבחר, אתה עומד בזכות עצמך. עכשיו מול המפאיניקים, מול השלטון המרכזי, אני לא רוצה להיות עם החותמת גם עדתי, גם דתי, ואין לי אפשרות לצאת מהמסגרת הזו. ואז יום אחד מגיעים מטוסים שהאמריקאים נתנו לנו, והממשלה מחליטה להביא אותם בערב שבת. והמפד"ל, אנחנו מחליטים שאנחנו נמנעים. לא יכולים להצביע בעד חילול שבת, ורבין הפעולה הראשונה שלו, הוא מפטר את שרי המפד"ל, אפילו לא מתייעץ, הוא מחליט, אתם נמנעתם החוצה. ואני ממנה את שולמית אלוני שסימלה את כל האנטי-דתיות של המדינה. אמרנו, אנחנו נחכה להם. בבחירות של 77 השתמשו הרבה בקלף של אבוחצירא, ואז בחצות היה לנו 10 מנדטים, 11 מנדטים, הטלוויזיה כל הזמן שידרה. ובשלב מסוים, לקראת 1 בלילה או משהו כזה, מודיעה הטלוויזיה, המפד"ל 12 מנדטים, והאגודה 4 מנדטים. הליכוד סך הכל קיבל 43 מנדטים, ואריק שרון שרץ בראש רשימה עצמאית, שלום ציון, קיבל 2 מנדטים, זה 61. ואז ב1 בלילה, כשכבר ראינו כמעט התמונה את הסופית, זבולון המר, יהודה בן מאיר ואנוכי, עלינו לקומה למעלה, למשרד של בורג, ואמרנו לו, דוקטור, אנחנו הולכים לקואליציה עם הליכוד. דוקטור בורג אומר, בשום אופן לא יקום ולא יהיה. אמרנו לליכודניקים, אתם רוצים אותנו שותפים, כיפות הסרוגות יהיו בכל מקום. בלעדינו לא הייתה לעולם, הליכוד לעולם לא יכול להגיע לשלטון.
סליחה, מה השם של האיש הזה? לא תפסתי.
אהרון?
אהרון?
יעקב ברדר? אבוחצירא. או אבוחצירא.
Yeah, so it's just maybe context. Aaron, Yehuda Ben Meir, and Zvulun Amer were the young coming power in the Mafdal party. And they wanted more power. Burg was the founding father of the party, and he was not only that he was in alliance with Mapai, with the labor, he was a rival. And this goes back to the Machtarot area, to the underground, Palmach, Etzel, Lechi, yeah, it's like, and these new young people didn't have this bargain, and they didn't really care Palmach, Etzel, I mean, you know, it's all the same for them. So they basically made a revolution because Burg didn't want to go, but then Begin smartly gave Burg 2 very prestigious positions. So in the end, politicians are politicians, but the forcing power, I mean, the motor of it was this trio, and that's A. B, the Haredi party, it's the first time, we need to understand, the rabbinical establishment was controlled by the religious Zionists, not by Haredi. Haredis are anti-Zionist. They are not supporting the government until that key moment when they established they established a sub-party in the party in order to get into the party, into the government. But the matter of fact is that they entered the government for the first time. And 4 or 5 mandates of Mafdal came from Moroccans. So basically, obviously it's a critical mass and there is many reasons of political turmoil and changes, but from my perspective and from the film perspective, the Moroccan gave, or they gave like a heavy influence on that, and I think in many ways it's very similar to today's. I mean, without Ben-Gvir, Bibi cannot enter the government. Obviously, different condition, different people, and so on.
It struck me when Aharon Abu Hatzir was talking about the Baba Sali sort of giving him his stamp of approval, but in a way he's sort of kind of representing him as not as a real active agent in politics. He's kind of the almost like the symbolic, venerated figure, and with all his followers, but then, and of course he deeply respects that as well, but not so much as as political players. But in many ways, would you not say that? And again, you alluded to the competing sort of dynasties and different branches of Abu Hatzira, but in general, wouldn't you say that these lineages of rabbis, they occupy and they came to occupy important positions of institutional power in Israel through the rabbinate, or by replacing Sephardic rabbis and so forth in positions of power. So in a sense, wouldn't you say that sort of this, I'm thinking of the image, going back to the Baba Sali's origins as a sort of reserved figure, sort of outside of the world of sort of the larger world, and then sort of being kind of almost like unwittingly thrust into politics. But I'm wondering if there's not, and to try to think of it taking a more critical perspective. I mean, weren't they really very much involved and even instrumentalizing their positions and prestige in politics? And of course, there's a maybe danger of talking about that, because the charge, sort of the charges against Abu Hatzira and other of these rabbinical lineages who were involved in sometimes different cases of corruption and so forth. So, how do you?
Yeah. So maybe we'll go back in his earlier and talk, as you taught us and Yoram Bilo taught us, the Ziyara, you're familiar with Ziyara? Ziyara is going and celebrate and practice religious ceremonies, and which was part of the Jews and Muslim culture in the Arab world and in Morocco in particular. And as far, it's also it's something that, I mean, it's debatable, but basically the assumption is that it started in the late 19th century altogether with building roads and secularity and modernity, and people went and gave respect and talked to and spoke with and asked for super tiny space, which he spent most of his time there by himself. And this, radical behavior create this mythology. And sure, obviously the establishment instrumentalized it, definitely. And sure, definitely, as I said, Mafdal, but not even other people like his nephew instrumentalized it and use it as to gain power but the fact is that I think that for the people themselves it was real. If it was real in sense of citizenship, of human rights, of regulation, of making better roads, better medicine, better politics for people, for community, obviously I think no, not enough at least. But it gives you visibility. You felt like you have a voice, you have a space, you have and it's important. I mean, it's important, if we look back to Baba Chaki, he appointed the idea. Baba Chaki brought the idea of everywhere where there is an Ashkenazi rabbi, he needs a parallel Sephardi rabbi. And although maybe it's not going to sound politically correct, but this family and people, they didn't come from many Ashkenazi, but they came from a democratic society where there is transparency and there is, everything is michraz, I have no idea how you say michraz, when there is an open call and you need to file forms and it's clean. And it was communal, it was based on relationships, and that's how you appointed people, you created your system, and so on. So Baba Chaki basically appointed many Moroccan rabbis that work in Sdom, in agriculture, and wasn't fit to this kind, and they give them job, like my grandfather, Rabbi Shimon Peretz, which together with the other rabbi established the rabbinical court in Afula. That's it? We want to go question? Sure, I'm sorry. Men like to talk. I can talk like for hours. Yeah. Yeah, please. No, we can open it to question.
Would you like to finish your thought?
Please come and watch the film. It will be ready in about a year and a half. Bezrat Hashem. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's good. Maybe just a final comment, because we began with this picture,
with the sun. Yeah.
The sun, and with there's sort of this, just to put this in a larger framing. So there's sort of this reconnection of the present, the monarchy, and of course, I think it generates a lot of interesting questions about the ambivalence of identity also. Anyway, just a comment, and I think we should open it up to discussion and questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we'll follow the same format we had before, so maybe collect 3 questions, and then you can respond. And I'm going to take over the privilege of asking the first one, because I can. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what kind of film did you think this could be? Every film you have to decide what is going to be the story, and there are hundreds of stories you could tell about the Abu Khatira family and the Baba Sali. So what kind of stories presented themselves as you were starting this project, as you were doing archival research? How did your thinking about what this film should be change?
Say it again. Sorry, the last sentence.
How, through this process, your thinking about what story I want to tell in this film change? And, sorry, that's one question. And another one, again, you don't have to talk about it, but I'm wondering if, in the context of this program and conference, the piyut tradition of the Abu Khatira family and the particular performative and oral style of the Tafilat region is something that you are working on and incorporating in this film as well.
Sure.
And I'll have a couple more questions.
Thank you so much for especially the political framework. I'm wondering if you do any film show any part of the Moroccan culture that I think of regarding the Maimuna or the Hilulot, the parades to the graves, which incorporate so much about song, and I would imagine that means also piyutim, but I'm not a scholar of it. But those are such colorful moments culturally, if that's a way to offset the heavy politics. And Miron is especially intriguing to me.
תודה.
שלום צדיק.
תודה רבה. Listening to you came to my mind was something that's, I'm not inventing anything new, but looking historically at maybe a great potential for a relationship. You're speaking about the Mafdal, as there's a lot of interests there, but you could imagine an alliance, a natural relationship between the Mafdal, like happened with Baba Khaki in a way, but in a wider context of before Shas came into the political, into this history of the political history of Israel. So, in that relation, what do you think happened there, could have happened there and did not happen in that alliance that could have been more naturally for traditional Moroccans and beyond even Moroccans, but specifically Moroccans, that could find themselves part of the, you can say, national Zionist, more open kind of approach, and when that naturally we know that did not really happen or happened in a certain way, and then something which is surprising in a way, how the same people came to an alliance with the Ashkenazi Haredi influence that basically brought Shas and all that Haredi influence into the Moroccan, which is something that seems not natural, even though when you look at the Baba Sali, maybe you understand that in a way it is. So I wanted to hear, if you decide to answer this question.
Maybe you'll address some of these points and then we'll collect 3 more.
Sure. So first, Shir, regarding your question. The initial motive, and I think it happened in every film I did, is once, and then you make a film, and it's in many ways, it doesn't matter what you think, what your agenda, what your politics. There is, as far as I understand, there is a minimum integrity that you have to give the characters, respect, and to the story. And I think it's a beautiful moment in a film, and probably also when you write an essay or an article or a book, the narrative starts, it's like a magic. It's like things start to come together, and you learn new things. So the first motive, as I said at the beginning, it was to bring another iconic, I hope I will make other films about other key figures, but Baba Sali is one of them. So that was the idea. But then you understand that in many ways the Baba Sali is almost, how should I say it? Let's say he's an enigma. And one of the reasons that he's an enigma is because he was very passive. And the way people are putting their footprint on history, it's when they're active, when they write, when they say something, when they're being recorded, then you can approach it, you can deal with that, you can create a narrative. And he was passive, and he was a symbolic, he was a real person and a real leader, but also a symbolic figure. So, and then I started to learn about his brother, for example, which I didn't notice at the beginning. And then I started to learn about the movement and their role and place in Morocco, and then later in Israel, and that made it even in some way more personal, and also it taught me, it's like, it makes sense. You could say, okay, that's how it happened, or at least the way, or where I want to put the light because obviously you can tell the story of political story of Israel from Burg's point of view. Archives, it's a sad story. It's a very unfortunate story. We don't have a lot of archives, especially of this early period in Morocco, and also in Israel. An answer that I always give about, for example, for Buzaglo, is when I first came to search Buzaglo, I went to the digital archives and libraries, and most of the result that I got was verdict, because Buzaglo is a criminal. It's like a name that has a lot of criminal issues. So you can learn from that there is not enough archives, and definitely not a sophisticated archive, and a lot of the archive is a colonial point of view. So also you always have this question: how do you use in a visual context, medium? How do you create a visual narrative? Do you duplicate the colonial look? Do you use it, but then how do you, it's very flexible. So yeah. Regarding Yagel Yaakov and the Abu Chatzera tradition, you probably all know that, but in Morocco there are two main canon books: the Shirat HaBakashot, Shir Yedidot, which is more dominant, and Yagel Yaakov, which is the Abu Chatzera book. And traditionally, each Abu Chatzera rabbi, when he came into his certain age, he had to contribute piyut to the also Abba Sali wrote, but he wasn't. Remember they did, and that's also about his character. He's not even a dominant poet like his brother or his grandfather. But the idea is, you see the guy over there? Yeah. Hi, you raise your hand. So he's running a beautiful ensemble, which also tackled the Yagel Yaakov, not only, right, but also the Yagel Yaakov. And the way I want to construct the aesthetic of the film is to create episodes or thematic episodes, and each episode will start with a piyut that the ensemble, we still need to negotiate about the budget, but basically, but basically each episode will open with the ensemble singing or chanting the piyut itself, which has also a thematic. It's like a Greek chord or something like that. So, and then in that way you can bring also the culture itself. You can bring the products, it's not an artifact, but the products of the family, and you can also create a narrative structure. So yeah. Regarding your question, if we'll see Lilotim Piyutim, so at the beginning of the motivation, it was to create actually a cultural film. It's like dealing, I was thinking about the Baba Sali as a great writer, for example, or a cultural figure. But as I said to Shir, it was quite an issue and a problem, and it's not this kind of film that are pure documentary, that are cinéma vérité, when you just open the camera and bring life. It doesn't look American, but it's an American aesthetics of film. Talking heads, and strong narrative, heavy use of archives, rather than this more artistic European kind of films. But it's just what it is. There is a beautiful tradition of American direct cinema, of course. But what I'm saying that, yes, there will be, as part of what I just said about the piyutim, I want to put inside the film moments that are pure documentary of mainly people who are going to the tombs. Now, I don't know if you know that, but there is a camera 24/7 online. You can go and film and be with the Baba Sali through the internet. It's a CCTV camera. But what I want to do, we didn't talk about it, but today most of the people that goes to the tomb, to the Latziyun, to the grave, and also a lot of people who goes to Morocco to visit other graves are Hasidic Ashkenazi. And also today the courts of the offspring rabbin, not most of their followers are Ashkenazi, or at least some of rabbis have crucial followers that are Ashkenazi. So my idea is to take footage from different period of time, which is a challenge. I hope I will find enough. From personal archive, from TV archives, whatever, and to see the way people went to the grave during the almost 40 years, last 40 years. I did interview people that are not meta-narrativing the story and that are actually, and there are like, one woman was 115. That's what she said. She just died a few months ago. Other people that are 90s, and they knew him. They knew him personally. They served him as ushers, or I don't know what the exact word. I don't want to use them as a not object, but as I don't want that people will speak in a reflexive way, and then people would speak about. He came to me in a dream. They came in dreams. So I'm still struggling with that. Maybe that's the best answer. Regarding your question, Aaron, when he came to power, he saw one time beginning putting a kippah on his head and approaching the Knesset, the parliament, and Aaron sits with his fellow mafdalniks, and they are so proud. They applaud and they're so happy. And he told them, "You idiots!" He just drank. In Hebrew, he said, "You took 3 or 4 mandates from you." So the premise or the idea of that story is that in many ways the Likud took a mafdal role in that area. Also, Aaron, and in many ways many of Abu Chatzera leaders, engaged with problems with the law. Most of them got clean, which is also raised a question about criminalization of Mizrahim in Israel. But he had a clash with the generation that he made a revolution, and he had a clash with them, and he formed Tami, which was a promise in that sense. It was a traditional Masorati party. They had 2-3 mandates, and then before he resigned the Knesset, he joined the Likud. And then the Shas came, and we know that one of the reasons that Shas came is because of Amaran, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and also the fact that a lot of Moroccan went to the way Israel divided the educational system of preschool, school, high school, they divided by parties. So a lot of Moroccan neighborhoods in Moroccan areas was under the responsibility of the Agudat Israel, which was the Haredi. So when you're going from the first grade or from kindergarten until the 12th grade, until you finish high school, you're already a Haredi. But as Daniel said, you're not from the shtetl, you're from the Mlach. So it's a new identity that formed. And I think in that sense that one of the greatest exits, if we're talking in the terms of startup nation of Israel, of Jews, is Israel. In America, of course. We are in a point in history that Jews are self-sovereign. They do horrible things also, but they're self-sovereigners. They control the government, and it's something that maybe Jews don't know how to do, as we can see with the condition with the Palestinians. But it gave them power, and I think in that sense, the Abu Chatzera family just took a piece of it, participating in this self-Jewish government that's called the State of Israel. Yeah, that's it.
Do you have energy for 2 more?
I'm fine.
Okay, we'll take 2 more.
So thank you. It was fascinating. quoting from memory a poem of Sami Shalom Shitrit, who's like in his home. His mother has a picture of Baba Sali and next to him of Ben Gurion, and like he called the poem Baba Sali lo הקים medina. The Baba Sali didn't establish a state, right? And this could be like an opening to like this kind of a narrative, right? That he wasn't in the political Zionism, but as we heard, it's not exactly there. So I want to return to you the question that you asked yesterday, your most difficult question that you asked in the first panel. In a sense, like your story, like it's an alternative or it is a tragedy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
אתה שואל שאלות קשות.
Thank you so much for this really, really interesting panel discussion. I guess just two quick questions that are interrelated. So you talked about the both the Alliance and Chabad coming into Morocco. And first of all, I want, what year was that? If you could mention that when you answer also.
The Alliance or Chabad?
I guess especially Chabad is what I'm interested in. And I want to understand from your perspective why they were accepting of Chabad, or was it only because it was they needed a partner and they needed, it had to be Chabad or it had to be Alliance. I would understand why they would choose one or the why they would choose Chabad. But if you could speak about that, and how much, if any, influence already there was then, because I hadn't thought about that, and it relates very much to my paper yesterday. If there was already this strong influence from Chabad on their religious practices, and then finally in the other direction, when you just mentioned that that Hasidic Ashkenazim go to the grave more than anyone else, and I'd love to know why you think that is, and was there an influence in the other direction? What is it that really moves them to come and go to the grave? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So, Almog, to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm thinking about our current time when there is a very large wave of right-wing, or I would say Zionist Mizrahi discourse, which try to reclaim and to retell the story of Zionism through the eyes of the Sephardic founding father of the Zionist movement, Shlush, Azula, Imuyal, Ben Zion, and others. And I don't know if, I don't know if Abu Hatzera is maybe from a political opportunists, people would say, yes, it's like a linear, it's an arc, a story arc. I think that in some ways it's a tragedy. I don't think that Mizrahi politics is represented in the media or in the government. And if it does, it's through horrible representation like Avishai Ben Chaim, which he's a nice person, but I don't agree with him. It's using right, like open wounds and real issues, but in a wrong way. And I think that in the end, it's an Israeli identity. It's an Israeli issues. I mean, Daniel, I mean, if you want to share, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm over the boundaries here, but he's writing about a beautiful and interesting topics that how the Moroccan side used the Jewish diaspora in order to gain political power among the US and in general in the Middle East. So in that sense, the Moroccan community is also instrumentalized by the Moroccan themselves and also by Israel, but they're not passive. They have agency. They're not puppets. They're not irresponsible for their matters. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question at all, but I mean, I don't know. I need to think about what you said. Regarding your question, I don't know historically the date that they opened the first Chabad, but I think it's in the 30s. It's basically people cooperate with it for many reasons. First of all, because of Parnassa. It gave work to people. People could, I'm sorry for going to the personal again, but Chabad that just a few years ago published a large book, Chabad in Morocco. I read it, and beautiful, amazing. Okay, Shaliach po, Shaliach there, Rebbe. And then, in the end, I see archival footage, letters. And I see a letter that we need to pay Rabbi Shimon Peretz, a teacher from Skura. Skura is a village not far from Warzazat, which is not far from Agadir, if it means something.
Yeah. Little far.
Yeah, 6 hours. By Moroccan standards, it's not that far. It's like the region where, from Agadir to the east, that's the influence, the area of influence. So, and he needs to get paid this and that, and it's my grandfather, which left his position in Skura, which I assume wasn't very profitable, to a position in Warzazat in a Chabad school, which probably wasn't. It's not like teaching in Columbia University, but it was, I guess, a better condition for him. And his older son, my uncle Yuda, went to a Chabad yeshiva in Fez. Now, it's in Fez, but most of the people who go and study there are from the rural area. So there is like immigration to the large city. And pay attention, as I said, the family usually, not only, but the community usually went to the Abu Hatzera yeshiva. And now there's the younger generation, is like 75 now, but the younger generation started waiting to Chabad yeshiva in school, and obviously the fact that Chabad was religious, it meant something. They didn't have a discourse, so we're erasing our culture. No, I mean, obviously it wasn't there. And regarding today, you can see a lot of Yiddish contrast, like small books that are portraying Sfaradi and Mizrahi righteous, like Sharabi and Baba Sali, and there is a small story about them, praising them mostly in Yiddish, and it's for the Ashkenazi community in Jerusalem, Bnei Brak, and so forth. And I think it's part of something that we don't really talk about, at least in the public discourse, about Ashkenazi Masortiim. It's a large movement, and also the Ziyara, or Yortzeit, or whatever, I don't know how you call it in Yiddish, of people, I mean, not you specifically, but how they say it in Yiddish, when people go to, like in Queens, they go to the Rebbe, and they do the same, and also in Jerusalem, you have tzaddikim, that people go, pray for other things. So I think it's intertwined, maybe, it's like it came together, yeah. We're done?
I think so.
I think we'll conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in a very fashionable delay, we're going to have lunch.
Moroccan food today? Moroccan food?
Moroccan food?
Moroccan lunch?
I wish. I'm going to stop using this. Okay, we have lunch and we have a break until 4. At 4, we meet workshop back in the Mississippi River. So this is our plan for the rest of the day. Lunch, breaks, talk.